Many parents are concerned that their kids simply spend way too much time, especially their teenager, on video games. You hear stories about places in like Korea, and certainly here in the United States, where practically an entire generation of young men gets so sucked into this culture of video gaming that this sounds disgusting to say, but I have to mention it. They have buckets next to their desk and console where their computer is, because they don't want to take the time to get up and go to the bathroom. And they're doing their business in a bucket right next to their computer because they don't want to lose a second. Truly bizarre. Now, I used to love video games as a kid, but the great thing about growing up when I did in the 1970s as a teenager is it cost money to play video games. And if you weren't that good, and I wasn't that good, you would spend $1 and that might only give you 15 minutes of play. And I typically wasn't going to spend more than $1. So it was very easy for me to regulate my impulses of wanting to play. I loved playing Pac-Man and Galaga in 1981. In 1982. But it was very easy for me to regulate my usage because I didn't have any more money after I put the fourth quarter in. Now, thanks to the internet, video games are essentially free for people. You could play hour after hour after hour and skip school and skip sleep and skip eating and skip human contact of any kind just playing video games. So I want to share with you some research. This comes courtesy of University of Michigan's Health Guide. They've got 5 tips for parents of teens who are worried about their kids spending too much time on video games. They did a poll. Nearly 9 in 10 parents in a Mott national poll say teens spend too much time playing video games. And there's increasing concern that it's affecting mental health and physical health. If you're inside all day long just doing this, you're not getting a lot of exercise typically. You're probably eating junk food. So it's a huge problem. Here's tip number 1, according to the experts at University of Michigan. Set limits. Parents may not always have the most accurate perception of their teens' gaming tendencies, the poll found. Among parents of daily gamers, 54% report their teens play 3 or more hours a day. This is compared to only 13% of teens that do not play every day. Just 13% of these parents believe their teen spends more time gaming than others, while 78% believe their teen's gaming is less than or about the same as peers. This is the classic sort of Lake Wobegon effect. In our town, everyone is above average. Well, everyone can't be above average and everyone can't be below average. So this is essentially saying many parents don't even realize how much time their kids are spending playing games online. And folks, I'm not a medical doctor and I'm not a psychiatrist, but I can just tell you, if you're spending 3 hours a day on video games and you're not trying to become a professional gamer, because there are people who make millions of dollars playing video games. If that's your chosen profession, then 3 hours a day is probably not nearly enough. But if you aspire to any career or life outside of video gaming, to me, 3 hours sounds like an absurdly high amount of time. And some of you may be saying, well, TJ, you're just an old fuddy-duddy. Certainly you've spent more than 3 hours watching movies or TV shows at certain times, right? Well, yeah, I have. And I think entertainment should be a part of everyone's life. But I specifically limit myself to, on average, no more than 1 hour of video entertainment per day. Now, if I watch a movie, it's maybe 2 hours. I watched The Matrix with my wife a couple nights ago. So that was a couple of hours, but I didn't watch any video the day before or the day after. So for me, something I'm comfortable with is, on average, 1 hour of video entertainment per day. So if your child is doing 3 hours of video entertainment, very hard for me to imagine how this child can be doing well in school and doing homework and having any semblance of a social life, talking to real friends in real life. So please keep that in mind. The second big tip from this particular health letter from the University of Michigan: keep tabs. Although researchers remain divided over whether violent games provoke real-life violence, it's crucial to monitor what a child is playing. A few studies have shown that immediately after playing a violent video game, kids are less likely to show empathy and more likely to show unsafe behaviors such as handling a gun. Now, I do have some concerns about the school of thought that says we're in a more violent society today because kids are watching violent video games all the time. First of all, we're not in a more violent society today. Violent crime in the United States is lower than it's been in 40, 50 years. But here's my big complaint with people who try to make the argument between kids watching violent video games and becoming more violent, and therefore they're advocating banning violent games. The place in the world that has more violent video games than anywhere else, Japan, those kids watch tremendously violent video games, and in the entire country there's like one murder a year. It's an absurdly low number of people murdered a year in that society compared to not just the United States, which is a very violent country, as you probably know, but compared to Europe, a lot of other countries. So if there really were a causal relationship between playing violent video games and kids becoming violent, I think you would see it in Japan. And in fact, you don't. I'm not suggesting that watching violent games makes you less violent, although there is a school of thought that says there's a catharsis effect, that if you're seeing all this violence here, you're less likely to want to put it out in real life because it's already getting out of your system. You can shoot someone virtually. You don't need to shoot them in real life. I don't know if I buy that either. But please keep that in mind. If you are a parent, you're going to have to make your own decisions there if you are concerned about the amount of time your kids are spending playing online video. Tip number 3, look for trouble. Overall, parents surveyed say gaming often gets in the way of other aspects of their teens' life, such as family activities and interactions, sleep, homework, friendships with non-gaming peers, and extracurricular activities. People like to be in denial. Your kid can say, I've got no trouble with video games. You might say you have no trouble with video games, but if other areas of your life are falling apart because you've squeezed out the time, then it is a real problem. Tip number 4, play together. In some situations, gaming together may offer a chance to bond and potentially open the door to other conversations and interactions. Play with your child. At least they're not isolated in their bedroom and you're isolated in some other room. To me, this seems like a pretty reasonable tip. I understand your 16-year-old son might not want to play video games with his mom. I understand that, but certainly try. And maybe you can do it at earlier ages. Now, my own daughter is only 6, and she's not really that into video games, but we do occasionally play one game that I enjoy. It's a word game where it's a free app. There's all sorts of clusters of letters, and it's your job to make words, not quite like a crossword puzzle, but you have to turn the clusters of letters into words. To me, it's a great way to use part of the brain, think of spelling, think of words, think of doing things creatively. And typically the whole game can be played in 2 or 3 minutes. And that is a game that I like to play with my daughter. Fortunately, she's not playing any other violent or non-violent video games these days. The 5th suggestion, offer alternatives. Parents polled use different strategies to limit the amount of time their teens spend gaming, including encouraging other activities, setting time limits, and providing incentives to limit gaming. It's human nature. If someone is just telling you, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, it's easy to tune out. It's easy to say, yeah, all you are is negative. And negativity does not work. Just making someone feel bad, deficient, typically doesn't motivate. One of the books I shared with you last week was by an author, P.F. Fogg, Tiny Habits. This is probably the best-selling book at the moment in the world on habits. And he really does a deep dive on the psychological effects of making people feel bad. That's why he believes it's not about morality or anything, but when you shame people for being too fat or too this or too that, it doesn't really help them change behavior, because if you're feeling bad about yourself, you don't feel empowered. You don't feel that you can make proactive changes. You're less likely to initiate positive new habits. So that's essentially the thesis behind this last suggestion, which is come up with an alternative. If all you do is yell at your kid, get off that screen, stop that, and yet you're at home just playing in front of your computer, or working on your computer, or just working all the time at the office, your home office, you're not giving your child a good reason to do something else. Take your child for a walk. Offer to play catch with your kid. Do something with your kid, and that way both of you are getting away from screens. Because let's face it, it's pretty easy for any of us to go through life like this. Now, I have a reason for using my iPad right now, because I am sharing some insights with you. But there's a classic New Yorker cartoon, or I don't know if it was New Yorker, but some cartoon. It's two parents talking to each other. And one of them is talking to the other one, but without looking at that person. And she's on her cell phone, and she's saying, yes, I hate the fact that my kid spends too much time on his cell phone. How am I going to get him off? and oh, the kid was right there too. So the kid is being lectured to by the mom of, get off your cell phone, Johnny, while the mother's doing it. Could have been the father too. So that's the real problem. We have to give options. We have to demonstrate options. If you spend all of your free time at home watching TV, why do you expect your kid to not look at screens too? I certainly can't argue that watching TV is better than playing a video game, or that video games are worse than watching TV. So please give that some thought. If you have a problem with anyone in your family watching too many video games, let me know. If you have solutions, let me know. We'd love to hear from you. You can post your comments on Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, and many other places.